Something big changed in 2026, and most drivers have no idea they're already breaking the law. Not because they're reckless, not because they're careless, but because the rules quietly shifted, and nobody sat them down and explained what actually changed. And here's the scary part. Some of these new laws don't just give you a small ticket anymore. They can hit you with heavy fines, license points, higher insurance, and in some cases, even jail time. So, let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you checked if the driving laws you follow every day are still valid in 2026? I want you to answer that in the comments, because most people are still driving based on old rules. And that's exactly how they get caught off guard. Now stay with me, because what I'm about to break down is not just surface-level information. These are real changes, real enforcement shifts, and real mistakes people are making right now without realizing it. And trust me, number 3 is the one most drivers completely misunderstand. Let's get into it. The first major change in 2026 is something you've probably heard about, but you don't fully understand how serious it has become. Using your phone while driving is no longer treated lightly. For years, many states treated phone use as a secondary offense. That meant officers could only cite you if you were already stopped for something else. That's gone. In 2026, many states have moved to primary enforcement. That means an officer can pull you over just for holding your phone, even if you're driving perfectly otherwise. And here's where people get it wrong. They think, I'm just checking GPS or I'm just reading a quick message. That doesn't matter anymore. Even touching your phone while driving, even at a red light in some places, can get you ticketed. The law is no longer about intent. It's about behavior. If your hand is on your phone, you're already at risk. And this shift is not random. It's happening because distracted driving has become one of the leading causes of accidents. So enforcement isn't just stricter, it's targeted. Now let's move to the second change. And this is one people don't notice until it's too late. Traffic cameras are everywhere now. Not just red light cameras, not just speed cameras in a few locations. In 2026, automated enforcement is expanding across cities, school zones, highways, even residential areas in some cases. And here's the part most people don't realize. You don't even have to be pulled over anymore. The ticket shows up later, and it doesn't always matter who was driving. In many cases, the registered owner of the vehicle is responsible. So if someone else is driving your car, you could still get the violation. That changes how accountability works, and it means you can't rely on "I didn't get stopped" as a safety net anymore. Now let's talk about number 3, because this is the one most drivers completely misunderstand. Hands-free doesn't mean what you think it means. People assume that as long as they're not texting, they're fine. But in 2026, the definition of distracted driving has expanded. Even interacting with your phone for navigation, music, or quick taps can fall into a gray area, depending on how it's done. And here's the real issue. It's not just about whether you're holding the phone. It's about whether your attention is divided, if you're looking down too long, if you're interacting manually instead of using voice controls. You can still be cited, so the mindset has to change. It's not "don't text and drive." It's "don't engage with your phone at all unless it's fully hands-free." That's a much stricter standard. Now let's move to number 4. And this one is quietly catching a lot of drivers off guard. Speed limits are becoming more dynamic. In 2026, cities and states are gaining more flexibility to adjust speed limits, especially in school zones, residential areas, and high-risk zones. And here's the problem. Drivers rely on habit. They assume the speed limit is the same as it was last year. But now, limits can change more frequently, and enforcement is tighter in those areas, especially near schools, especially during extended hours. And if cameras are involved, you won't even realize you've been caught until later. Now let's talk about number 5. And this one is becoming a serious financial problem for drivers. License point systems are getting stricter. In the past, you might have needed multiple violations before facing serious consequences. Now, fewer violations can lead to license suspension or mandatory courses. That means small mistakes add up faster. A minor speeding ticket here, a distracted driving citation there, and suddenly your driving record looks very different. And once points accumulate, insurance companies notice. Which brings us to something most people don't think about. These laws are not just about tickets. They're about long-term consequences, higher premiums, restricted licenses, even job limitations if driving is part of your work. Now let's move to number 6, and this one is about something most drivers ignore until it becomes a problem. Move-over laws are expanding. Previously, you had to move over for emergency vehicles. Now, in many places, the requirement includes any vehicle stopped on the side of the road with hazard lights. That includes broken-down cars, tow trucks, maintenance vehicles, even regular drivers in some situations. And here's the key detail. If you can't move over safely, you're expected to slow down significantly. Failing to do that can result in fines, or worse, serious liability if something happens. Now let's talk about number 7. And this one is becoming a major enforcement focus. Reckless and aggressive driving. We're not just talking about extreme behavior, we're talking about tailgating, weaving through traffic, brake checking, street racing. In 2026, penalties for these behaviors are increasing significantly, including higher fines, license suspension, and even jail time in some cases. And here's why. Because these behaviors are linked to some of the most dangerous accidents, so enforcement is no longer lenient. It's aggressive. Now let's move to number 8. And this one affects more people than you think. DUI laws are getting stricter, not just in terms of penalties, but in how they're enforced. Some states are expanding requirements like ignition interlock devices, even for first-time offenders in certain cases. And penalties are becoming more visible. Special license markings, longer restrictions, higher insurance impacts. This is not something that disappears quickly anymore. Now let's talk about number 9. And this one reflects how driving itself is changing. New rules for bikes, e-bikes, and pedestrians. As more people use alternative transportation, laws are adapting. There are clearer right-of-way rules, more enforcement around shared roads, and stricter requirements for safety, especially in urban areas. And here's the issue. Drivers are used to traditional road behavior, but now the environment is changing. And if you don't adapt, you can easily violate rules without realizing it. Now let's move to number 10. And this one ties everything together. Technology is driving enforcement. Everything from cameras to automated systems to data tracking is being used more aggressively. This means fewer warnings, more recorded violations, and less room for error. The system is becoming less dependent on human interaction and more dependent on consistent enforcement. And that changes how you need to think as a driver. Because you're no longer just being watched by officers. You're being monitored by systems. And systems don't overlook mistakes. Now take a step back and look at all of this together. These aren't random changes. They're part of a bigger shift toward stricter enforcement, toward less tolerance for risk, toward holding drivers more accountable than ever before. And here's the reality. Most drivers are still operating on old habits. They still think checking their phone quickly is fine. They still think small speeding doesn't matter. They still think they'll get a warning. But 2026 doesn't work like that anymore. The margin for error is smaller, the consequences are bigger, and the system is less forgiving. So the next time you get behind the wheel, you won't just drive out of habit, you'll drive with awareness. Because now you know something most drivers don't. The rules didn't just change, the entire mindset of driving changed with them.